How do you charge your clients for the advice you give them? Do you charge an hourly rate? Maybe you charge a fixed rate or the more traditional percentage rate. Maybe you provide free initial advice and load every cost onto your ongoing service fees. The next 3 short video presentations will set out the most effective charging method for the benefit of both the client and you, the advisor, looking at initial, ongoing, and alternative charging methods. You may be surprised. My name is Andrew Goodwin, and this is a short presentation on initial advice fees. This presentation is about fees, but let's have a look at the word initial. Why do we call it initial fees or initial charges? Initial, the first letter of a name or word, typically a person's given name or a word forming part of a phrase. We understand that. But it also means something existing or occurring at the beginning. Like the initial letter of your name, it occurs at the beginning. So we're talking about fees that an advisor might charge at the beginning, at the outset. Okay. Fees are an exchange for a service. It's money for something that you do to benefit that individual. However you arrive at the actual fee, the pounds that you might charge your clients, I'm telling you now, all fees are made up. It doesn't matter if you're going to buy a car or a house, all these costs are made up by somebody in their brain. If you have a look at this sign, just like the road junctions that are made up, the names are made up, the numbers that are added to the motorways are made up, then you can see the array of charges that we have. £700 average fixed charge for someone investing £10,000. Compare that on the right hand side to 0.58% average ongoing advice fee for someone investing £10,000, £1,000 for a £50,000 investment, and so on. It's a variety, but however you look at those, they're nothing more than formulas. They all end up with pounds in some way or another. Initial advice fees are effectively best calculated as a percentage payable for the advice. Ongoing support fees are a percentage payable for ongoing support following the advice. And then we have a mixture of hourly rates and fixed rates. These are all formulas to arrive at an amount of money that we would charge a client. It's quite often suggested that advisor fees are quite heavy. However, let me look at the breakdown. Where do the charges go? Based on £1,000 initial advice fee, and remember, we arrived at £1,000 because we made it up, then typically from that, you would pay about 20% in regulatory costs. FCA fees, levies, which have been rising dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years, professional indemnity, insurance premiums, compliance support, and the software needed to do the job are all some of the standard industry requirements just to be a financial advisor today. On top of that, there is another 10% that we pay for typical business office costs: fuel for the car, heating for the office, printing materials, paper, ink, and of course the office rental. And on top of that, we then have to pay tax. It could be corporations tax, there could be some national insurance, a bit of dividend. However you formulate your accounts, you'll pay typically 40% tax. This all adds up. So what you have left from that £1,000 initial fee to your clients is 80% times 90% times 60%, which equals 432 likely retained money. In other words, you get 43% of the money that you charge your clients. That's one hell of a lump to give away. That's why advisor charging fees, especially initially, are quite high. We're covering a lot of cost in order to exist in the industry. I want you to keep that 43% cost in your mind. Let's consider a client who invests £20,000. If you charge the typical advice fee of 3%, that's £600. But of course, you don't get all of that. You only get 43%, 43.2, but say 43%. That works out at £259 that you will be able to retain and spend in any way you choose from that £20,000 investment and all the advice time that you have spent for that client. At Truly Independent, our advisors can charge up to 4% initial. Therefore, for an investment of £20,000, they could charge as much as £800, which gives them a slightly higher net rate of £345, typically retained. So let us take that a little bit further. Let's say the £20,000 investment has raised to £200,000 investment. An advice charge, typically at 3%, would be £6,000. At 43%, which is the amount of money that you will retain from that £6,000 charge, works out at £2,590, typically retained. At Truly Independent, our advisors can adjust their charge to say 1% initial for such a large amount of investment. Therefore, that would calculate out to be a £2,000 charge at 43%, which is the amount of money they can retain, means they would have a net amount to spend of £864. Larger investors should pay more because there is more risk, but not necessarily at the same rate all the way through. So in this example, you've collected around £500 more than the £20,000 investment, but it's not thousands more because we've used an adjusted calculation to bring that pounds value down for the higher investment. IFAs need to be this flexible, and our initial advice fee range goes from 0% to 4% so that advisors can have this flexibility. We have to be careful, however. Being able to charge 0% initial fee up to 4 does not mean you should do. And I am certainly not the sort of person who advocates a zero initial. I think it's a bad move. Let's have a look at free initial advice, how it might work, what I would class as loading the ongoing. If someone has a model of 0% initial plus 1% ongoing, what they're doing is trying to build a business that would give them a larger return when they come to sell. But one warning, nobody is interested in paying for that 1% at the rate you think. It would be revalued at a 0.5% ongoing anyway. So it's a bad idea. And you're also playing the lottery here for a number of reasons. You won't get a bigger sale at retirement, and you're actually charging your clients more money. You could approach this slightly differently, go for a low initial advice fee, loading the ongoing instead just the same, but at not as much. A 0.75% initial fee maybe, and a 0.75% ongoing fee. It's better, but still reliant on long-term commitment. If for a minute or two we ignore the growth in the marketplace and we look purely at the fees, the percentages that you would charge. An example of 0% initial fee plus 1% ongoing support fee instead, in other words, loading everything onto the ongoing support fee, that would mean over a typical 5 years, the advisor has collected 5%. Of course it does. 5 years, 1% ongoing, I'm collecting 5%. Over 10 years, it's 10%. How does this compare to the typical, the more traditional 3% initial and 0.5% ongoing? Well, over 5 years, it's 5.5%, and over 10 years, it's 8%. So over the short term, in simple, crude collections, it's actually slightly more advantageous to the advisor, and over the long term, it's more advantageous to the client. That's it in simple terms. I understand that financial advisors want to make sure they get value for the work that they do, especially over a long period of time working with the client to achieve their goals. 3% initial means that in the hand you'll get 1.3%. We've already done that calculation. It's 43.2% of whatever your initial fee is, which is 1.3 in the hand net income. This is capital into your business early on. You could invest it, you could spend it. It's needed. It's needed now. You can also invest it, and like your client, if you invest in the similar funds, it could double in 10 years. So that net 1.3% could be 2.6%, very near to the actual 3% you charged your client, getting all those costs back. If added to a pension with tax relief, it could actually double in 10 years to 4.3%. So you're making a big difference to your own personal finances if you charge the initial and load it into your pensions instead of loading the initial into your client's ongoing charges. It appears more than 1% ongoing, but by comparison, it actually benefits the client more. Let's take a look at this over a longer period of time. Let's revisit 3% initial and 0.5% ongoing, the traditional method. Over 10 years, you would collect 8%. Now that you've taken your initial charge and loaded it into your own personal pension with the tax relief, your effective charge has now gone up to 9.3% flat. Over 20 years, that works out at 18.6%. And if you compare that directly to the crude 1% ongoing over 20 years of 20%, there's not a great deal of difference. So by charging a higher initial advice and lower ongoing fee, the collected figures remain very similar over the long term for the benefit of the advisor, especially if you fund your own pension with the initial advice fee that you charge your clients. But it's the clients who benefit more. I have run a little comparison based on a £100,000 investment into two different charging models. The blue column, 0 initial and 1% ongoing. The orange column, 3% initial and 0.5% ongoing. And these are based on an annual growth return of 7.2%. Because as we know, with the 72 rule, if you get 7.2%, you can double your money. Of course, that 7.2% is gross. We're taking a charge off the client, so the £100,000 will not double to £200,000, and you can see the effect on the graph of your own deductions. Right at the very outset, your £100,000 gets a lead on the initial charge because that would reduce to 97 almost immediately. It does. Although they're both growing by year 2 and year 3, the blue, 0 initial, is taking a lead until they reach the point of 7 years. At 7 years, there starts to be a favour on the ongoing charge being lower. That ongoing charge means there's less money coming off the investments and starts to offset the initial as it progresses towards 11 years. It therefore shows plans that go beyond 7 years are better off with an initial charge and a lower ongoing than the short-term plans where a 0 charge and 1% initial. In fact, if you're planning an investment to be just short-term for a short-term target, then your 0 initial and 1% ongoing benefits the clients. But for long-term, beyond 7 years, it does not benefit the clients. I hope by now I'm starting to demonstrate that if you get the initial advice fee and a much lower ongoing support fee right, it's a win-win for both the advisor and the client. We have to charge because we have to exist and we have to make a living. So let's get that initial fee right. The first thing I would say, which is additional consideration, is that your initial fee is for advice. It's at the start, initial with initial. And I is in initial, it's the first letter, and it's for you, it's I. It's my charge for my benefit right now as we do this advice. The ongoing fee should be mutually exclusive, completely separate to the advice arm. And also, if you load everything onto the ongoing fee, there's no guarantee you're always going to get it. A client could move away. A client could cancel a relationship in favor of some other advisor. The regulator may cap your ongoing fees and reduce your 1% charge down to 0.5% anyway. That's a real current threat. An advisor may fall ill and forced to sell their business. Ongoing fees are less important to buyers of your business than assets under advice. They would rather buy your assets that the clients have invested than necessarily the fees they're looking for. They can always adjust the fees, but they can't adjust the assets that they're buying. Initial advice fees can be invested by the advisor for personal gain, and this is key to this. If an advisor charges just a little bit more for the advice, not only do they get the money now, but they can put that into their pension now and benefit from that growth, just as the client is. And we've already demonstrated that's not a disadvantage to the client against higher ongoing fees, it's actually an advantage. A common mistake I see advisors operating is the idea that they have ongoing advice. In theory, that makes some sense. In practice, it doesn't make any sense at all. There's no such thing as ongoing advice. Advice is when you give a recommendation and have a requirement to issue a suitability report. It's an advice point. So there's no such thing as ongoing advice. And this is where some of the confusion is. Keep advice separate from ongoing support. We use the terminology ongoing support at Truly Independent for that very reason, that it allows us to create an advice point, and the clients would know about this from the outset. So for example, let's say you recommend, this is an advice point, a pension for long-term saving to retirement. You set the target goal and you monitor the shortfall. And you will do this monitoring using technology and your own monitoring and support systems, your value proposition, your annual reviews, and this would be charged to the client on a lower ongoing support fee to progress and monitor to that target. Now, at retirement, this triggers an advice point. It's nothing to do with the ongoing support fees that you've gathered to this point. It's an advice point. And now again, you have to have create some advice for the client. And you would charge, therefore, an initial fee again, because it's a completely new process. Now, you may therefore compare all the possibilities, look at the marketplace, and make a firm recommendation what that client should do with their pension pot. Maybe they'll go into drawdown. Once that's done and you've charged a second advice fee, because it's an advice point, therefore an advice point equals an initial advice fee, you can then charge a very different and adjusted ongoing support fee to monitor their new drawdown plan. So in both these circumstances, the first recommendation, the pension, is supported by an ongoing support, and the second recommendation at the point of retirement going into drawdown requires another fee and then another ongoing support fee. That's the best approach, and that's the approach we adopt at Truly Independent. So here's a summary. Keep the advice point as advice. Don't trade it off for ongoing support fees. They're completely different and separate. And when you give that advice, charge for it. Believe me, you need the money. Keep initial charges simple in whole percentages. 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%. High initial and low ongoing is better for the client. I've evidenced this, that beyond 7 years, even if you had a high initial charge, the client is better off. Be consistent. Start at 4% for low investors and reducing that for the high net worth. And it's absolutely fine to charge 0% for high net worth clients who've already paid you a lot of money in the advice side of the business. But be careful. Do not, again, exchange any kind of ongoing fees for an advice point. Use this money when you get it initially to fund your own pension. Time makes money. Get the money from the client now, put it into a pension, get the tax relief, and allow that to grow. We've already evidenced that it benefits the client for a higher initial and lower ongoing than no initial and higher ongoing. So therefore, never, never, never exchange advice fees for ongoing fees. This slide brings me to the end of that presentation on initial fees. Next week, presentation number 12, I'm sticking with fees. I'm going to talk a little bit more about ongoing fees, why we charge it, and what you need to do to justify it. So join me next week for a little more insight. As always, for more information on Truly Independent, please go to happyfinancialadvisors.co.uk. Have a look at our main client website, trulyifa.co.uk, or you can buy the book, The Happy Financial Advisor, when I do explain a lot more about charging structure for clients.